lot to break down about what was happening today. We've been talking about Kid Cudi's testimony, week 2 in general. But right now I want to bring on Elizabeth Millner, our Law and Crime reporter, who is inside that courtroom for Kid Cudi's testimony. Now, one of the things I want to ask you about, Elizabeth, is we're reading the transcript, right? We're reading what he said on the stand. What was his tone like? Because I got to tell you, he was hitting one-liner after one-liner after one-liner. By the way, shows up in court, leather jacket, smoking a cigarette. I mean, this is Kid Cudi, major celebrity comes in. What was the substance of what he was saying? And I got to ask you the tone in which he was saying it.
Well, obviously, I didn't see the cigarette smoking part. I was inside the courtroom when this was going on, but it was a packed courtroom today, Jesse, despite it being very cold outside today, despite it even pouring down raining this morning when I came to court today. A lot of people were inside that courtroom because a lot of people wanted to know, what did Scott Mescudi, aka Kid Cudi, really have to say? So when he walks inside the courtroom, to your point, Jesse, he was very, very casual. He had on a leather jacket. It was a little bedazzled. He had on a white t-shirt. He had on jeans, something that you kind of really don't see necessarily, especially in federal court. I mean, all the other witnesses have been in suits, even some of the escort witnesses, but for Kid Cudi, he just came in very casual. He just walked right to the witness stand, didn't pay Diddy any type of attention from what I could see of him, but he got onto the witness stand and swore that oath like he normally, like all the other witnesses do. And then that's when we got into the testimony. And let me just say, Jesse, there was so much testimony. I was just writing things down and down and down again because there was really so much. And we knew about kind of the Molotov cocktail incident, especially because it was laid out in Cassie's federal lawsuit, right? But just hearing Kid Cudi explain it from his own words were just a whole nother level, I could say.
So people were laughing, right? People were laughing when he was testifying because he made that one comment that he sees Sean Combs. He had a meeting with him and said he looked like a Marvel supervillain. Were people laughing?
No. Yes, people were laughing, but if you're going to ask if Diddy was laughing, it didn't seem like he found that joke necessarily funny, but there was definitely some courtroom laughter, even from some of the jurors who were in the box. They were laughing as well, too, but from what I could see of Diddy, it didn't seem like he had much laughter going on in that specific moment, which was a complete 180 from kind of his demeanor when George Kaplan was testifying, where he seemed a little more jovial. He was laughing along, but when Kid Cudi came on the stand, it felt like the smile just whoop went down, right, and he had more of a serious demeanor and serious tone listening to Kid Cudi testify. And
because, you know, Kid Cudi was providing some quite important pieces of damning evidence against Sean Combs. I mean, talk to us about his direct examination. What were some of the highlights that you took away from his direct examination? Because the prosecution, in my opinion, I was talking about it before, they're calling him not only to corroborate, I think, the account of Cassie, but to establish some of the elements of racketeering, right? The underlying crimes of maybe kidnapping, arson. Talk to us about some of the big moments from his direct examination, and then we'll talk about what the cross-examination was like.
Right, because the jury has been hearing about Scott Mescudi a lot, and they've been referring to Kid Cudi as Scott Mescudi during this. So seeing Kid Cudi in the flesh, I'm sure a lot of people wanted to know, what did he have to say about December 2011 specifically? Now, around that time frame, police actually responded to Kid Cudi's then home. He's no longer in that home anymore now, but they responded to a call about a break-in at his home. So he said that day actually started with a call from Cassie herself about 5:30, 6:30 in the morning. And Cassie relayed to Kid Cudi that Diddy had found out that the two were dating, and she sounded kind of stressed during this phone call. So what Kid Cudi did was he picked her up. He took her to a hotel called Sunset Marquis, so that way it was a little safe for her to kind of hang out there and be at that hotel. But Kid Cudi at the time said he didn't think that Cassie was even dealing with Diddy at this point. Diddy had asked actually for Kid Cudi's address around this time, and one of the big moments was that Cassie was the one who actually gave Diddy Kid Cudi's address. And so Kid Cudi said he didn't know what Diddy was going to do. Then when he was at the hotel, he actually got a call, or he had spoken to Capricorn Clark, somebody that was Cassie's friend, but also somebody that had worked for Diddy. And so when Kid Cudi was speaking to Capricorn Clark, was speaking to Capricorn Clark, Capricorn sounded scared on this phone call, pretty much on the verge of tears, because it was Diddy, one of his affiliates, an unnamed person, and Capricorn Clark were at Kid Cudi's home. Kid Cudi was kind of describing that essentially Capricorn Clark was essentially taken by physical force to go with them to Kid Cudi's home while Kid Cudi wasn't even there. So Kid Cudi could verify that Sean Combs, aka Diddy, aka Puff Daddy, whatever we're calling him, was inside his home when he wasn't there. Kid Cudi said that he actually went home after speaking with Capricorn Clark and just kind of rushed over there. Then we see an exhibit photo of the entrance of Kid Cudi's old home. It's the home of the break-in, and you see the front gate door. And he described his neighborhood at the time being as far as being very quiet, family oriented, and they had to kind of mention that he was driving a Porsche around that time. So Kid Cudi actually called Diddy while he was driving home, and there was some profanity here, so bear with me, everyone. He said, "Mother effer, are you in my house?" And Diddy said, "I just want to talk to you. I'm here waiting for you." And surprisingly, Kid Cudi explained that Diddy sounded relatively calm while he was on the phone speaking to him. So Kid Cudi thought his security cameras were working, and turns out he said someone kind of had moved them and angled them a little bit down, so that way I guess whatever was going on wasn't captured on that video. And they had moved them the opposite angle, and said Kid Cudi verified he wasn't the one who moved those security cameras. But when he got home, Jesse, he said gifts were open on the kitchen counter. Stuff was pretty expensive. It was from Chanel. And that his dog, surprisingly, was locked in the bathroom. Now, his dog normally roams around free like a lot of our pets normally do. I mean, my cats right now are probably wandering around. I would never lock them inside the bathroom while I'm out of home or anything like that. So I can understand why that really stood out to him as far as his dog being inside the bathroom with the door closed. But he had that dog for about a 2-year period, and noticed that after this break-in had happened that his dog became jittery and was always on edge at the time. So Kid Cudi got back into his car, he says, and called Diddy because he wanted to fight Diddy. He wanted to square up essentially and just find him and fight him because he believed that Diddy broke into his home. And so he said after this phone call, he thought about the reality of the situation and what more could possibly escalate from that situation. So what he ended up doing is he just called the police. And when he had returned home, because remember, he was driving around looking for Diddy, essentially wanting to fight him, he says. And when he returned home, the police were there at his home. He filed a report, and then he was speaking with Cassie about the situation. And Cassie seemed pretty depressed about the situation, according to Kid Cudi while he was on the stand. And then he had said, because this was around December of 2011, and we know that shortly after that, Kid Cudi had spent the holidays with Cassie over at her family's home in Connecticut, and then they broke up shortly after. But the thing is, a few weeks later, January 9th of 2016, again, a few weeks after his break-in, his car caught on fire, or not even caught on fire. A Molotov cocktail was lodged into the driver's side of his car, of his Porsche, mind you. And we saw a lot of exhibit photos from that Molotov cocktail being inside, or not being inside that car, but we saw the aftermath of the Molotov cocktail in the car. So we saw an exhibit photo of the damaged car. You could see a cut at the top of the roof from the Molotov cocktail. The roof was blown out. Kid Cudi had said his friend Chip, who is one of his best friends, took those photos because he had got a call from his dog sitter at the time that essentially his car was on fire. So he had rushed back home to see what happened. Lo and behold, this entire incident happened. So we saw more exhibit photos of the burned driver's side door, some smoke damage, again, that hole of the roof, damage to the driver's side car, burned seats. He said when he arrived home, he did see the damage to his car, and he saw the Molotov cocktail. He saw that burnt bottle on the ground right next to the outside of his car. So he said police were actually there when he had arrived home, and his car wasn't even able to be repaired after this fire. And so they had said that this cocktail was in the driver's seat, and his reaction, to your point, Jesse, earlier about him just being so casual while he was on the stand and his one-liners, well, his one-liner for his reaction about a Molotov cocktail being lodged into his car was, "What the F?" And obviously I can't say what the F means, but we all know kind of from that. But as far as just the aftermath of it, there was this whole meeting at Soho House where essentially Diddy and Kid Cudi shook hands. Kid Cudi said that he didn't necessarily believe Diddy when Diddy had said, Kid Cudi had said something along the lines of, "What are we going to do about my car?" And Diddy said to Kid Cudi, "I don't know what you're talking about." But as we ended the redirect, because there was some cross-examination in between that essentially Kid Cudi believed Diddy was lying about this because, there were some objections thrown here and there, but he kind of snuck in there that he believed that Diddy was a violent person and was the reason behind this Molotov cocktail in his car.
Just unbelievable testimony. So as I mentioned before, it not only helps corroborate Cassandra Ventura's account, but, kidnapping, arson, these are key crimes for the racketeering statute. These are exactly what the prosecution is looking for, and you could see how Kid Cudi is filling in the pieces of that. And by the way, having Kid Cudi, a star of that, I don't know how much the jury actually knows about Kid Cudi, but having him testify, that's compelling for the prosecution. Although I will tell you, I thought it was interesting what the defense was trying to do with him under cross-examination. What were some of the highlights of cross-examination? I believe it was being conducted by Brian Steele, who, as we know, no stranger to high-profile people in the music industry. He famously represented Young Thug in his trial. What was the cross-examination about there?
Well, another time we could actually see Brian Steele in action, because so far we've only seen him cross-examine one other witness, and that being Officer Israel Flores, one of the first witnesses called in this trial. But we really got to see Brian Steele once again in action, and he has just such a different tone from some of the other defense attorneys. He's not very flashy or very showy, and I don't mean that in a bad way or anything like that. He's really just straight to the point. It doesn't seem like when he's cross-examining a witness, it's because he wants a reaction from the audience, and the audience being the gallery or any of the jurors. He really just kind of wants to get straight to the point with the cross-examination. And so what he was getting to under cross was that there were fingerprints taken. There was DNA collected. However, this DNA came back to a female, according to the defense. However, there was an objection. That objection was sustained, so that part will be kind of struck. And then he was kind of essentially gearing this a little bit more towards Cassie. Brian Steele had said something along the lines of, Cassie played you, and Kid Cudi responded yes. Brian Steele was asking Kid Cudi about his music career and how popular he was, especially around that time frame. And around that time frame, I was still in high school, but Kid Cudi was so huge around that time frame. So I think what the defense was trying to do was possibly allude that maybe it was a deranged fan who had did this, and it wasn't necessarily Brian Steele's client at the time, or client now, that being Diddy. But then Brian Steele was kind of trying to be like, oh, you did drugs with Cassie. And Kid Cudi was like, well, we smoked some weed. And I think the defense was trying to also get in Cassie's sexual history as well, too, whether or not Kid Cudi and Cassie were intimate. However, they kept on having sidebars during this moment. And as we all know, with the sidebars, there's a lot of static noise. So we don't know what they're talking about. They kind of huddle off into a corner. They kind of go through, I guess, the arguments. The jury's still inside that courtroom, but us in the gallery and the jurors even too, we hear this just loud static noise. So I'm not sure kind of what the bottom, or what they got to as far as the bottom of just this sidebar. But Brian Steele was just essentially kind of trying to paint it as that Cassie essentially played Kid Cudi. And so when Brian Steele was cross-examining Kid Cudi just about whether or not Cassie had told Kid Cudi about sexual abuse, and Kid Cudi responded she never did. Kid Cudi surprisingly said that he was in love with Cassie.
Right.
He also said that he never saw Diddy hit her, and Diddy never interrupted Cassie and Kid Cudi when they were together. And so far from what I could see, even of the jurors, kind of while they were while Brian Steele was cross-examining Kid Cudi, the jury seemed very engaged with this testimony. I mean, they're always engaged, but you could really tell that they were super engaged about this, probably especially after seeing those exhibit photos. Then we kind of get into the Soho House meeting, and that was the meeting where Kid Cudi, Cassie, and Diddy himself all got together. They all kind of just hashed everything out, and that was surprisingly the last time Kid Cudi had seen Cassie. And so Brian Steele was asking Kid Cudi, she was living two different lives, and Kid Cudi responded yes. And so then they kind of ended the cross-examination as far as Cassie was the one who gave Mr. Combs your address, and Kid Cudi responded yes. So those were some of the biggest highlights of the cross-examination. Obviously, I took a whole bunch of notes so I could really get into the weeds of it, but I know for time and everything like that, I can't say everything right now.
Well, you do provide such incredible detail, and we appreciate it because there are no cameras in there, but I know you have to head back into court. Look, it seemed to me that they were really trying to assassinate Cassandra Ventura's character, questioning her motives, questioning if she's manipulative of both Kid Cudi and Sean Combs, the burner phones, things of that nature. So a lot more to discuss. Elizabeth Millner, thank you so much. I know you have to head into court. Great reporting as always.
Thanks, Jesse.
Now, we're going to continue the conversation in a minute, but before we hit a quick break, I got to tell you, when you listen to this P. Diddy trial and you're hearing the arguments from both sides, I got to say, for me, it seems to make sense. It seems to remind me about how important having a great lawyer matters. And that's why I want to bring up real quick our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, who helps make this show possible. If you don't know who they are America's largest injury firm, and they are a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. And you know why? Because they win a lot. Let me tell you about their track record. So in the past few months, Morgan & Morgan secured a $6 million verdict for a car crash victim in Florida, $13 million for a wrongful auto death in Georgia, and another $6 million for a trucking accident in New York. And mind you, this was all after insurance offered their clients significantly less in each of these cases. And if you're listening to this and saying, my case isn't worth millions of dollars, that's not really the point. Why not just start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Because Morgan & Morgan makes it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Live by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on screen. Thank you again to Morgan & Morgan. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back right after this.